Welcome, everyone, to the Storycraft Cafe. We are continuing our launch month celebration. And, last week we had Christopher Paolini for our launch day celebration. And we talked all about writing fantasy and science fiction. And today I wanted to have on a couple of my absolute favorite writers in the whole wide world, Lynn Constantine and Valerie Constantine. They write together as Liv Constantine. And a few years ago took the publishing community completely by storm with their book The Last Mrs. Parrish, and it just blew everyone's mind and turned the genre on its head, for and just did wonderful things. And I got to know Lynn and Valerie a few years ago, and I couldn't think of anyone better to bring on this show. So I'm happy to have Lynn and Valerie. Welcome to the Storycraft Cafe.
Well,
Thank
thank you.
you, Hank.
What a
We
nice
love
thing
you.
to say. Yes.
We before we get started, I have an announcement that we're having a raffle every week this month, and we'll be giving away one Writing Mastery Academy membership every week in April. Entering the raffle is simple. Just join the community and make a post in any of our public spaces. This week's lucky winner is Angela Watt. Our next drawing will be next Friday. So, Angela,
Yes.
you are our lucky winner. Congratulations. Join us next Friday at noon Eastern for a chat with psychological fiction author Sarah Pinborough. And then at 2 o'clock Eastern, we're going to have back to back shows next week. And we're going to have historical fiction author Taylor Brown. There's something for everybody this month, so be sure to tune in and join us. Um, Lynn and Valerie, how are you guys doing?
We're great. Thank you. We're together for a change. Valerie's here at my house. So she's sitting out in my husband's office, who you just saw walking down the stairs trying to get our dog, I think, to
Yeah,
leave.
trying to wondering why I'm in his office.
Well, when I emailed you last week, Lynn, you said Valerie will actually be with me that time. Would it
Yes.
be, And I was like, I couldn't even imagine my luck to get to have you both there together. So that's awesome.
Perfect timing.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's been a little bit since we chatted last. Your last book, The Stranger in the Mirror, um, was was amazing. I loved it, and has done amazing things. What are you guys working on these days? And why are you together?
Well, we
Ah,
did we did an event right last night for the Friends of the Fairfield Public Library, which was wonderful in person with Greer Hendricks and Wendy Walker at the Sacred Heart Community Theater in Fairfield. So that's why Valerie came up. And we've been doing some Audible stuff. So we did an Audible original quite a while ago and just put it in print. The first shot, which is the actual prequel to The Last Mrs. Parrish, so a little novella. And we have another one, not a prequel, another Audible coming out in May called Misconception, an Audible original. And then we have another manuscript that we're finishing up. Hopefully, we'll get into the hands of readers sometime, maybe next year. Can't really say too much about it. And then we have like a little secret project that we're working on that, again, we'll be able to announce maybe in a few weeks.
Nice.
So,
Well, and there's a lot of interesting things going on in publishing these days. You talk about the Audible originals, and that's happening more and more, and people are writing new material to go to Audible first,
yes.
and they're taking the place of a publisher in a lot of ways. What are you guys seeing? As authors who are well established in your genre, how do you see Audible coming in and shaking things up?
I think they've done an amazing job. First of all, these short stories or novellas for Audible are only maybe 2 to 3 hours, and I think that is a welcome thing for some readers. There are a lot of, I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, I can't really listen to a 12-hour book. I don't. When am I going to do that? I don't drive anywhere that's that far." But a 2 or 3 hour novella is terrific. And what Audible has done now, they've gone further and they are actually doing plays where it's just all dialogue and there are sound effects, and so it's sort of harkening back to the old days of radio when there were radio plays, people before television, people
Right.
gathered around the radio to listen to stories. And Audible, I think, has touched something there as well. I think that's going to be very popular.
I agree.
Absolutely. For people who might not know your story, you guys are sisters, and as such, do you? Was there a storytelling gene that runs through your family that you come from a long line of storytellers and
Yeah.
kind of got you guys started wanting to tell stories and before we get to you writing together, what is your family history with storytelling?
I mean, we have a long history of sitting around the kitchen table with our mother and our aunt and our grandmother and hearing stories from their childhood and from friends that that they've known. So I think, which is probably true for most people, with your families and friends. But we've always loved storytelling and always been big readers and together. So we would go to the library once a week and pick the same book out, and then we would discuss the book. So there's been a real love of reading and literature, as well as storytelling and interesting things, happening in the community or in the past. Wouldn't you say, Valerie?
I would, and I would add that we were also lucky. I'm sure there are lots of other people who have had this experience, and there are many who have not. But our grandmother, came from Greece, and so there were lots of stories about Greece. And then she studied in Egypt for a few years, so we heard
Oh,
those
wow.
stories, and that just sort of added an exoticness, I guess, to the storytelling that we heard of these faraway places that we'd never visited when we were kids. And so that also, I think that whets your appetite even more when you hear about lands you have not been to. We were
Yeah.
very fortunate.
And before you guys published The Last Mrs. Parrish and really got into the thriller space that you are dominating these days, you guys actually wrote um, some other stories together before that and published a few years ago. Is that right?
We did. We did. Well, it was a story about a Greek family, and it was over 20 years ago now,
Oh,
Hmm.
right?
wow.
It
Yeah.
doesn't seem that long, but it was. I mean, in some ways it does. And it was a story about two sisters, second generation Greek American sisters, not autobiographical at all, maybe a teeny
No,
bit,
no.
right? And based a lot of the characters on people in our family and people we
Yeah.
knew. And then we had a few cousins who said, when the movie gets made, I want to play blah, 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 and which was always a fun thing. And so that was our first foray when we had no idea what we were doing into collaborating and publishing. So,
For when a lot of people write their first book, there's a lot of them in that story. Writers tend to, and I don't know if it's just because your story is so close to you that a lot of you comes out in the book, and it seems like a lot of times you just kind of need to get that out in the first story, and then once that's out of the way, then you can sort of move on to tell other stories. But do you
mhm.
think that's a common thing that for a lot of people's first book, there's a lot more personal attachment to it and a lot of kind of holding the mirror up to yourself, so to speak, and the first thing you write is more of a reflection of you?
I mean, it certainly was true for us. I don't know for others if that's, their experience. And I also think it's likely that for many people, that first book may still be sitting in a drawer. So there's not a way to necessarily to know,
Yeah.
if you look at a debut. I mean, and now with a lot of the really fabulous debuts in the genre that are coming out, I hope that's not true because they're very dark. So for the benefit of those authors, I hope for their sakes that there isn't too much of them in that. But yeah, I mean, I know that that's been said, and I would think it probably is, as you're, kind of getting to know your writing style, and then, I think that we all would all have a tendency to try to want to make sense too a bit of our histories and of our lives, and so for us, it definitely got poured into that book, and I think too it was a bit intentional as well. So for Circle Dance, we wanted to leave a legacy for our children because Valerie and I are not married to Greek husbands. nor our brothers. And we grew up in the Greek community where my parents, pretty much all of their friends were Greek. We went to the Greek church. There were dances, activities, and so it was almost this microcosm, really, within society. And we knew that was not going to be the experience that our children had. And also, we had a connection to Greece through our grandmother, who was born there and who had a Greek accent, spoke mostly Greek, cooked all the Greek foods. That she wasn't, my children never met her. So we wanted to leave something for them to see, well, this is your heritage and this is what you come from. And so I think that was also why the book was so close to us. Although, again, like I said, the two sisters, their stories were not based on our lives, but definitely their parents and their aunts and uncles and stuff, they were drawn from our own family.
Around that time, that very popular movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, came out, and it was a stage play and a book and the whole nine yards. And I think that was a lot of people's first connection to Greek American culture. Was that a fair representation?
Really funny that you say that, right? Because it came out just as we were pitching our book.
Oh, that's funny.
Right. And I loved the movie. Lynn loved it as well. Our mother, not so much. She thought that was a terrible representation. And we kept saying to her, Mom, it's supposed to be funny. It's it's a spoof kind of thing. It's no, that's not how we are. But anyway, the second time she watched it, she thought it was funny. So she did come around. Is it a fair representation? Maybe it is in some cases.
In some cases, not so much for our family, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the Windex, totally not. The Windex.
No, Windex. Greek words for sure. Because our grandmother would always say, "That's a Greek, gymnasium. That's a Greek word." Right?
Well, as someone that's from South Mississippi, and I have a lot of Cajun relatives, no matter what your ethnic heritage is, there's something funny,
Right.
about what, where we all come from. And it's, people are going to make fun of, but if you can laugh at yourself, that's even better.
Right.
So that book was 20 years ago, give or take. And then, fast forward about 15 years or so. And what made you guys start wanting to work together again, but, in a completely different subject matter?
I was writing. We had gone, not our separate ways, but just within our careers and our lives. And I had small twins, and I had moved to Connecticut at that point. And it was really when I went to Thriller Fest back in, I don't even know, 2011, 2012, maybe. And it reignited my wanting to get back into writing. And I wrote a thriller on my own at the time. And I told Valerie, you really have to come with me to Thriller Fest next year. It's a great conference. And she did. And she said, I'll come, but I don't write thrillers. And I said, well, it doesn't matter because they really teach a lot of craft. It's just a great experience in any event. And I think Valerie was the one who said to me, well, would you be interested in collaborating again? And I said yes. And we wrote a book, which was really more women's fiction. Okay. And we spent, I don't know, maybe about a year on that and had it professionally edited, and we were pitching it and really wasn't going anywhere. And so during that time, the idea for The Last Mrs. Parrish came to us. And again, it wasn't an intentional decision. We didn't say we're going to write psychological thrillers. We just came up with the idea for the story as we were walking and talking, not even about writing, just this whole idea of, of what's going on in that book. And when we got our agent, she said to us, this is a psychological thriller. And we were like, oh, okay, we had no idea. Because, and our sister-in-law who had read it said, this is a thriller without a murder. And so that it did launch the Live brand. And we since then graduated to murder, and the books got a little darker and a little bit more and more. And that just sort of set the path for us. But I mean, we both really.
Did you say we graduated to murder?
I did. In our books. Let's be clear, not in reality. But yes, I mean, the body count definitely went up as the books. Not with all of them. I mean, and they're not, as you know, we don't write horror, so it's not
Right.
gratuitous, and it's not. But I mean, people are, there's some casualties in our books now, and so that's how we ended up going this way. But it was not ever a conscious decision per se that this is what we're going to write. It was, we really just follow the story. Yeah.
So, Valerie, you told Lynn that you didn't write thrillers or
Right.
psychological suspense. What did you consider your your zone, your
Genre.
preferred genre to write?
Just contemporary fiction, and if I had to narrow it, I would say women's fiction.
Okay.
Certainly no murders and no and the I mean, I think that, contemporary fiction can be dark as well.
Sure.
There can be people who are dark, but not the sort of, suspense, holding your breath, waiting, what's going to happen, what's going to happen. I certainly would want them to turn the page, but
Right.
not because they wanted to know who was going to get killed or
Yeah.
right. So it's a little bit different. More about what relationship issues and how people interact with each other, families, that kind of thing.
Which actually our
Well,
books do as well, right? I mean, I do think that they really are much more psychological in the sense of relationships and synergies and trauma and the things that people go through, and we build in twists and turns and hopefully surprises along the way. But we definitely are character driven in our books, much more so than plot, I would say.
And one of the things that I love about your books is that you feel very close to the characters and to um, the the plot that's evolving. It's very what's the word I'm looking for? It's very uh,
Visceral.
claustrophobic almost in that
Mm.
you just feel like you're in the story. You're very close to the characters, and some psychological thrillers may have a very wide scope, and you've got events that are happening in a city, and who's doing it and that sort of thing. But
Mm.
yours are very um, you feel very close to the characters, very almost like the stakes are pulling you into the
Mm.
story. So does that come from your love of other genres that and kind of weaving those elements into the story?
Whose turn is it?
It's your turn.
Okay.
We're taking turns.
Well, first of all, thank you. That's wonderful to hear. I love hearing that. And I think that is true. As Lynn said, our books are definitely character driven, and we
Yeah.
get really involved with our characters. I mean, I know when we're in the midst of developing, especially the first go round, um, you really live with these characters. They're with you all the time. You're thinking about them when you're walking or taking a shower, sometimes even dreaming about them. And we really come to care about them. And when we have to kill someone, it's really painful. It's when someone has to die. So again, thank you, and I'm glad to hear that because we do care a lot about our characters, and I feel like we get to know them really well.
Right. You guys wrote an op-ed piece for crimereads.com a while back, the rise of the female stalker in fiction and film. um, there has definitely been a tide that has turned in psychological suspense and thrillers, especially where as you talk about in this article, that the roles have changed in a lot of stories, and I credit you guys for a lot of that. There's a lot of shift in the way that we see stories and the way that stories can come about. What do you guys attribute that to, or how do you feel about the changing roles and who we consider typical good guys, bad guys? If you want to look at it black and white like that.
I think that Gone Girl was really what a watershed moment for
Yeah.
the genre, because all of a sudden, you're looking at this seemingly likable character, seemingly victim at the beginning of the book, and it's totally turned on its head. And I
Right.
think it almost gave permission to be able to write female characters that are not perfect any longer. And I mean, not that they necessarily, there's a spectrum, of course. Now, in that book, she was the bad guy. I mean, and, you know, even though, although the husband wasn't great either. But I think it really gave us a freedom to still write a protagonist who isn't necessarily the villain, but who isn't perfect and who can make mistakes and have secrets and do things that are not conventionally in, you know, in the women's fiction, the perfect woman who looks perfect, acts perfect, all of that. And
Right.
also, again, to switch it around so that sometimes, so you don't know, it doubled the playing field in terms of who the bad guy is, because it's not a guy necessarily anymore.
Right.
It can be, you know, one person, two person, whomever. And I think it really opened the floodgates for more interesting and layered and complicated characters, which is great because it's much more interesting and much more realistic, I think.
Mm.
What do you think about that, Valerie? What do you think about the changing tides and the the way we tell stories and how we see the typical protagonist and antagonist and that dynamic?
You know, I think it's such a reflection of society, and the women's changing role in every area. Really, when you look at it, I was talking to. Well, actually, I think Lynn and I were talking about how different it was when we were in corporate America, and in a boardroom full of men who constantly interrupted you,
Mm-hmm.
and not even, you know, having to sort of get as much as you could in. Whereas today it would be, that's the third time you've interrupted me. Let me finish here, and that would be accepted. You know, there's more of
Right.
there's more parity,
Sure.
and so I think that as that has occurred in corporate America, in politics, and you know, in just so many arenas, that art has followed it, and so the storytelling has reflected that, which is terrific.
As co-authors, do you see a changing dynamic when you come together as Liv Constantine and this third entity kind of shows up? It's that's not necessarily Valerie and it's not necessarily Lynn, but the combination of the two create another writer. Do you notice that change that happens as Liv comes into being?
No, fortunately, there's no. It's a little scary. Like, it sounds like it could be a good plot for another book. No, I think we we're still pretty much individuals and who come together. And fortunately, we being sisters and having written together for so long, a lot of our styles are similar. And so the finished product hopefully does appear to be coming from one person. And we do have a thing, we joke, as we're in the midst of, especially of developing a project, where there is a bit of a mind meld where
Yeah.
we'll start to talk and I'll say, what if we name her and we'll both come out with the same name? Or what if, I'll have an idea or Valerie will have an idea and it's exactly what the other one was going to say. So there is a bit of a merging in that sense, but there's not like a third person coming out of that. It's just it's more of a unity, I would say.
Mhm. I would
Is
agree.
it sort of like, family musicians talk about this interesting the way that family members can harmonize together?
Mhm.
Like that there's, they just almost have a sixth sense of what the other person is doing and have the ability to just merge in ways that other people can't.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy for that.
That's
Mhm.
great. Yeah, I
Yeah.
hadn't thought of it that way, but
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Ashley Hatter from our community had this question. She said, given that character motivations may be imagined differently by each co-writer, is there a method that y'all have perfected for zeroing in on the most advantageous motivations, thereby preserving the momentum of the story and wheedling off the chaff?
Hmm,
I thought that was a great question.
that's a great question.
Yeah.
We talk about our characters extensively before we even begin to write. Although, having said that, the character still changes as the writing goes on, because just as you get to know a friend better the longer you spend time with that person, the longer you know them, it's the same way with writing characters. As the story progresses, then the character becomes more known to us, and perhaps we even go back and change some things. Um, but I think because uh, because plot is also an integral part of the process, the characters, the general shape of the character is also driven by the plot. And so we have a pretty good outline of what that character is, and then as we get to know the character better, it comes into its fullness. And yeah, there are things that definitely get cut along the way. Or if we go back and say, well, he wouldn't really say this. I think this person would say that. They would say this.
And we do that. I mean, and to answer also, to go on to what you're saying, the question about if we have a difference of opinion, there are times when one will write something and the other will come back and say, this really doesn't sound like, I don't think she would say this. I don't think she would do that. And typically, if the other one doesn't agree, well, then we'll talk it through and say, okay, this is the situation. Do you really think, after she was just kidnapped, she's going to go hitchhiking, or, I mean, with that, something like
Yeah.
that. And then we'll talk about it, and we always come to an agreement, because there are times when you're writing and you're going away, and we are, since they are developing, and we are two different people, we can be kind of going in a different direction, but we have together laid the foundation for who the character is. And so, or we may even get on the phone and say, I'm not really sure, what you would do in this situation, or really what's going on here. What do you think about it? Or we need to develop him or her more. So that's how we revise so many times that by the time it's finished, any discrepancies have been worked out, because we are looking at each other's work over and over and over before the book is finished.
When you guys wrote The Last Mrs. Parrish, and before it came out and, just took off like a rocket, like it did you know that you had something special on your hands? But before all of the stuff happened, did you have any idea that it was going to be what it wound up being?
Hmm. Well, we
And
certainly,
that's such an unfair question to
right.
ask. I
I
know,
mean,
but
we sure hoped it.
yeah.
I do think, no, I don't think that we foresaw everything that happened. But I do think that we both felt very pleased with the manuscript when we handed it in. We loved it, and we just hoped that everyone else would love it. Would you agree, Lynn?
I do. I mean, I do think we both felt like it was a special book. We knew that it propelled us, because at the time, of course, we didn't have an agent. We were not represented, so it was a self-imposed deadline. And I do remember feeling a very huge sense of urgency to get the book done, because I just felt like, we didn't want to. It just felt very timely, and like it needed to be finished, and just before, like, someone else wrote the book, I guess, was the thought. So I do think that, I mean, again, as Valerie said, I mean, we could have never anticipated Reese Witherspoon, which was just amazing and continues to be amazing, or, even being in People magazine, those kinds of things we didn't think about, but we did feel like this was a special book that almost wrote itself, and that we really felt compelled to write.
What do you do when you get the news that you're going to be picked, by like Reese Witherspoon's book club, which um, which is an honor in and of itself, but it I'm sure it comes with all sorts of attachments. When once you get recognized um, by this group of people, that usually leads to other people looking at it, and now we know that it's being made into a film at Netflix, and I would imagine that the once the ball gets rolling, um, you know, there's all sorts of things that can happen. What goes through your mind when you first get that news?
We were stunned when we got the news, and it was right on the heel of, being in People magazine, which for us was, like the apex, right? And then
Yeah.
right after that was Reese Witherspoon. We got the news. We were together at the time. Lynn was visiting me, and and our agent said, "Do you have time to sit down for a call with me and your editor?" And we thought we were in trouble. I was like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?" So we did. We were sitting at my kitchen table, and my husband was there, and they said, "Are you sitting down?" And we said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, we just want to tell you that you have been picked. You've been chosen as Reese Witherspoon's pick for the month of December." And we both sort of exclaimed, and we're like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing news!" And they said, "But you can't tell anyone until
Oh,
they announce it." And it was like 3 weeks away, the announcement. And my husband, when we got off the phone, said, "What was that all about?" And he is the last person you want to tell a secret to. Forget it. It will, secret. I don't think he even knows the meaning of that word. And we couldn't tell him. We couldn't say anything.
oh
So we
my
made
gosh.
something up that he's just sort of looked like, "Oh." But that was thrilling. But I also have to say that it brings with it a lot of pressure,
I
um,
bet.
for the second book, which we were going to soon be in the process of writing, and so there's that too. There's that side of it as well. So,
Well, there's a certain there's I like to talk about the gift of anonymity
mm,
when you're writing that first book, because no one's expecting anything.
Right.
They don't know that you're working on this book. They have no expectations whatsoever. But then you get a book, your first book comes out, and Reese Witherspoon is blowing it up, and People Magazine is calling you, and then you have to sit down and start plotting out that second book. Is that as nerve wracking as I imagine it to be?
It was torture. The second book, yeah, it was very, very, very difficult, and I think that was our hardest book to write to date. When you, yeah, I mean, and we love that. It's the last time I saw you, and it was a very different book from the last Mrs. Parrish. Much quieter book, more of a murder mystery, sort of Agatha Christie,
Yeah.
and again, we love the characters in that book, but it was just really difficult to because we didn't really know. We knew what readers were going to be sort of expecting, but you can't deliver the exact same book, and so that was a hard book. But then when we came to the Wife Stalker was a similar experience to Mrs. Parrish, where that book we really had a great vision for it, and it came very easily, um, and pretty much same with The Stranger in the Mirror. So hopefully we don't have to go through that sophomore type of experience again.
yeah.
But I mean, you hear that all the time, like when they call it the sophomore slump. I mean, I think most authors struggle with that second book.
Mm.
Yeah. In music, they talk about how when a band first comes out, that first album is usually songs that they've worked on for years and
Mm.
practiced and had time to write and all that. And then by the second, third album, the members of the band are shopping for curtains in their new mansion, and so it's different priorities make for different art a lot of times, but
Yeah.
when you're writing together, is your planning process different than when you're writing separately? Do you when working with a co-author, do you find that there's a different level of planning that needs to happen so that you're not stepping on each other, you have the same vision for characters and where the plot's going, as opposed to when it's just all in your head alone?
Um, it's been well. I mean, we do have our routine pretty pat at this point. So we speak every morning when we're writing, and we have our plan for the day, where we're headed, who's writing this chapter and who's writing that chapter, and a general idea, because we do give ourselves the freedom to change things or to be creative. but we do have a general outline of where we're going. And there are times even that we might write a chapter that comes away later in the book. It doesn't necessarily have to be chronological, but we have our assignments and we finish that through the day. And then we speak at the end of the day. We exchange the work that we've done, we edit each other's work, and then we move on. So I think we pretty much have. I don't think either one of us feels like, oh, I'm being held back from where I want it to go, because we talk about it so much, and it's a daily thing.
Do you how do you divvy up the writing tasks? Valerie, you said that someone may be tasked to write a chapter. Then maybe Lynn is tasked to write the next chapter. How do you decide who writes what?
Well, as Valerie said, we do speak every morning and we talk about what's next in the book. And we just volunteer, I'll write this, you write that. And we write it at the same time, because again, it doesn't matter if we happen to write something that doesn't mesh completely, because we're going to fix it later. So we just go and write. And sometimes I'll write a half a chapter and then send it to Valerie and say, I really don't know where else to take this. Do you want to take a shot? And she'll say, sure. And she'll do the same with me. So it's a constantly evolving process. And I think with every book, it changes a little bit as well. And we find a better way to do it each time. And it just goes like that, day by day. We usually just know what we have a vision, for writing for each of us. So it's not ever really a situation where we both are fighting over a certain chapter to write. It works out.
Do you have a vision for the end of the book? I know you talked about there's a certain level of planning that goes into the book, but when you first start hatching the idea for it, do you know how the book's going to end, or does that come later through the planning process? Some people can visualize the end of the book and then have to create everything that leads up to that, and some people have a dynamic beginning but have no idea how it's going to end, and then start figuring out discovering what that ending is going to be. What do you guys what's your process like there?
In thinking back to each of the books, we have a pretty good idea of the ending. We have a general idea of the ending. We don't always know exactly how it's going to get there. Things can change along the way, and even the ending can be refined a little bit. But I would say that for the most part, we have the ending figured out when we begin. And as you said, that's not true for everyone. I know. I remember listening to R.L. Stine, who writes the Goosebumps series, and he writes the title and the last line of his book first, and then starts.
Like, how do we get there from here?
Yeah. And so I think that and then there are others who just start writing and have no idea where they're going, and but it turns into something wonderful. So we're in the middle. We have our general outline. We kind of know what the big twist is going to be, and then the little twists come along the way. Would you agree?
I would, for the most part, but there are times, we know what the major twist is, but we don't always know how that's going to resolve itself. So there have been times when Valerie said, well, what's going to happen to her at the end? And I'll say, well, I don't know, we'll have to figure it out. So, right. So, there are some major endings that we don't know. Mrs. Parrish, we knew because we started with the twist and with what was going to happen. But I think it's different with every book. But generally, as Valerie said, we really, the one thing we do know is the major twist. That's how we start our books, is what's the big twist going to be, and then we take it from there.
And for The Wife Stalker, we had two different endings, and we had one ending that was the one we were going to go with, and then right before we turned it in, we said, what if we do this instead? And we sent both of them to the publisher, and then there was a consensus of, I think we should go with this one, and it was the second one. It was not the original ending.
I love how you I love how you talk about the major twist in the book when there's actually like 18 twists in a Liv Constantine book. Is that something that you look forward to, the misdirection of the reader? Knowing that, do you get all giddy inside knowing that I have invested so much emotional energy in this book and you're just going to pull the rug right out from under me?
We certainly hope so. Yes. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
we work very hard to make sure that we are not being unfair in the misdirection, and that anyone can go back and read and say, "Oh, okay, no, I thought she was this, but she really never said that. It was I inferred that from the way that they wrote this." And so again, we look with a very careful eye when we're finished to make sure there isn't anything disingenuous in someone's thoughts. So if there's going to be some misdirection or lying, it has to be either in dialogue and they're intentionally lying, or they have to believe it in some way, because we're just really sticklers about that. We don't think it's fair to have a twist that someone can't see coming because you didn't play fair. So we
Yeah.
do have a lot, and we do have a lot of fun trying to figure it out. And because we also know that people are looking for that. So we have to say, all right, well, their reader's going to think this. If we do this, they're going to expect that. So we have to make it like this. And yeah.
yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. Lynn, you talked about going to that writing convention and how motivating that was for you. Um, One of our goals for the Storycraft Cafe is to have a place where writers can come and inspire each other, motivate each other, be an ear for when days are bad. Just to have that interaction with other writers that you can only get by being in community with other writers. What does community mean to you? And are there people that you share your work with other than your co-author? Or what do you do to stay connected to the writing community and just for your own mental health?
I think, yes. So International Thriller Writers is the organization that runs Thriller Fest, and that's a wonderful organization that I would encourage everybody to look into joining. It is free if you're with one of their approved publishers, and it's I can't remember, it's under $100, I think, for somebody to join, because when you're not, because we had joined before we got published and we paid at the time. And anyway, and they have this, and we've both met and made friends with so many wonderful authors. It's really the most supportive community of any profession or endeavor that I've ever been involved in. And yeah, we don't typically share our work. We do have some beta readers, but if there's a concern, if we've written something and we're really feeling too close to it and on the fence, we do have a few author friends that we will share it with. And because we know that they'll be honest, because they get it, that we don't just want them to say, no, it's great, and they write in the genre, they read in the genre. So that's very helpful. We support them in sharing news of their work, and they do the same for us. My Wendy Walker and I do a thing called Real Book Talk now, which is a 60-second reel for new releases. And so we do a quick little interview and we post that on Instagram and TikTok on release day for authors. So there's just a lot of that going on in the community, which, I mean, I can't imagine navigating the publishing career and the writing career without that support and without those friends.
Yeah. Your first book we mentioned earlier, The Last Mrs. Parrish, is being made into a movie at Netflix. How does it make you feel? Do you have hopes? Do you have are you nervous about it at all? Having someone take your work and interpret it in a way, that your hands are, completely off of it for the most part. Is there any trepidation around there, or is it all excitement?
I think it's pretty much all excitement, and they've been absolutely wonderful with sharing the script and asking for input. So that's been amazing. We didn't
Nice.
necessarily expect that, and it doesn't always happen. And we've had the advice from other authors whose work has been made into film it doesn't belong to you anymore. Now that's
Right.
the movie, that's not the book. And so I think that we did, we went into it feeling that way, that, oh, all right, we hoped. I mean, they did talk to us first, and they did. It felt like very much like they had the same vision that we did, which
Right.
was great. That
Yeah.
was terrific. And as I said, we've seen the first pass on a script, and we were pleased with that as well. So, yeah, just lots of excitement around it. And, I don't think there's any trepidation at this point.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Um, the form of the novel lends itself to more leisurely tell the story. There are things that you can draw out, even though you need to keep the pace up. Just the form itself just lends itself um, to be able to take time and to
Mm.
explore things that maybe a 2-hour movie you don't get to explore as much. Um, or do you know, or do you think that there are things that will have to be trimmed out, or and do you think that affects the story at all, or do you think it becomes something different?
Um, Definitely, because it is going to be a film, not a series. And I think, yeah, you always have to cut things out from a book for
Yeah,
the film. But as Valerie said, we really have a lot of faith in the screenwriter. She's done an amazing job, even on the first pass, and really, we feel like really captured the characters and the heart of the story very, very well. So I don't think it's going to miss. I mean, I think hopefully it will prompt people to want to read the book and learn more from that
right.
aspect.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
yeah, I think it's. I think it'll be sufficient time to convey what needs to be conveyed. And yeah, and we have a lot of confidence in the team, in the whole team.
right. A fun question that I've been asking here lately, and this will be fun to get your answer. Um, What is a piece of writing advice that you have gotten? Maybe it's something that has been a tremendous piece of advice that you've held on to, and maybe it's helped you at some point, or maybe it's a horrible piece of advice that you think about and go, "Oh my God, I would never do that again," or "I'm so glad I didn't take that advice." Um, Valerie, do you have something that comes to mind?
Yeah, I have one of each. Um,
Yeah, I love it.
right. The horrible advice I got, now this works for some people, is to be in a critique group,
Mm,
if especially before you're published, and to just be in this group with other people who are also trying to break into writing. And I think that, and I did do that, and there were, I mean, you're with people who you don't really know have the kind of expertise and wisdom to really judge the work. So I
Yeah,
think it can be a great thing if you're with terrific people, but it can also really be sort of damaging to your self-esteem and your confidence. I think one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever either heard or read is, don't wait for your muse to show up.
mm,
Just sit down and write and write and write, and don't stop. The more you write, the more you can write. So,
yeah. That's
great.
um,
excellent advice. What about you, Lynn?
So I think the best advice is, and it came to us when we were pitching that very first book that I mentioned that never did get published, and it was keep writing the next book, and it doesn't matter, write the next, write the next, write the next, in from different authors at Thriller Fest who had maybe 6 or 7 books in their drawers, and they kept going, and that which also goes again with perseverance. So I think that is the best advice I would give a new writer is, okay, if you're not selling the first one, write the second one, and if you don't sell the second one, write the third. I mean, of course, after editing and doing what you need to for the book. And I think the word, this wasn't necessarily personally given, but I think advice that's not so great is the write what you know adage, because I don't think that's true. I think you can research, and it's more, I mean, how many books can you write on what you know? And it's part of the fun and the fascination to me of the writing life is learning new things and immersing yourself into a new world when you're learning about what your characters doing, whether it's just hobbies or professions all of that. So I would say write what you are passionate about and what interests you and what you think is what's going to make you want to sit down and write every day.
Great advice. Whether you start with The Last Mrs. Parrish, The Last Time I Saw You, The Wife Stalker, or The Stranger in the Mirror, or The First Shot, the prequel, um, where would you recommend someone jump into your work if they're just discovering you and know nothing about Liv Constantine? Where is the ideal on ramp?
Oh, well, I guess start at the beginning, right, Valerie? I'm going to start with
Yeah,
Mrs.
with
Parrish.
Mrs. Parrish.
Yeah, if you're looking for a, what a sort of a decadent, delicious read, as they call it. If you're more of a mystery, Agatha Christie, that type, then I would say Last Time I Saw You. If you're really deep, deep, deep into psychology, would be The Stranger in the Mirror, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, and The Wife Stalker would be in the same category as The Last Mrs. Parrish. And the prequel to The Parish, you could really, a lot of people have emailed and asked, do I need to read it first? And you really don't. And in some ways, I think it's better to read Mrs. Parrish first because it gives you more context for the
I
prequel.
do too. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, because the
I would
prequel
put
is a
the prequel
totally different
first.
story. Yeah, about Amber, but yeah, so you don't, it doesn't ruin the prequel to read Parrish first.
I was going to ask you if it mattered if you read the prequel, if you could read them out of order, because sometimes you do have a reveal that then when you read the prequel, it kind of messes up if you know that. But
Mm.
good to know.
Yeah. So I don't think there would be a spoiler either way, but I think you probably, there's some things that happen in this first shot that would make more sense if you read The Last Mrs. Parrish first, right?
Gotcha.
I agree.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Where's the best place to find? Is your website the best place to
Yeah.
go if someone's unfamiliar with your work and want to dig into all the stuff that you do?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
livconstantine.com.
Yep. Yeah.
Excellent.
And that has all our social media links as well.
Great. Well, we're going to send everyone to see you. Lynn, Valerie, thank you so much for joining me
Thank
today.
you, Hank. It was great to be here.
Excellent.
We've asked great questions. Thank you.
Yes.
Guys, that's all for today. Join us over at storycraft.cafe, and we'll see you next week.